Browns-Steelers was not like a well-played game.
No.
But
it took forever, too. It's like a 15-round prize fight.
I mean, like, as we're like, I take back what I said about East Coast time. It was not like a well-played game, but it felt huge. Like, the stakes felt
very
really
dramatic.
high.
The Nick Chubb injury ends up like being like a really, really big talking point out of it. You feel really bad for him. Like, his knee had to be reconstructed already earlier in his career. And now, like, it gets a hit so bad they don't want to show you the replay on television. Like, that's how bad it was. And just, you couldn't have had two more different games on at the same time. We spent so much time on just the boredom of Saints Panthers, like the absolute, like the most mundane football game you could possibly, like Olave makes a great catch. It's the only memorable thing from the game whatsoever, aside from the back door by the Panthers. And then you watch Steelers Browns. It's like, oh, well, what happened in that game? Well, there were 4 turnovers in the first quarter. The Steelers had negative yards in the fourth and came back to win in the fourth, despite having negative yards while doing it. Like just everything, the injury, just a ton of newsworthy things in one game, and Saints Panthers with basically absolutely, like, it'll be the most forgotten game of the entire season probably, and Steelers Browns definitely will not. Just how bad is Deshaun Watson? Like, we know he's not as good as we hoped before the year, but is he like a little worse or a lot worse? And maybe this Sunday's game against Tennessee goes kind of a long way to answering that question. The Browns are a 3-point favorite, very low total. If you had to kind of guess right now, like a lot worse, way worse, Deshaun Watson.
Still looks like he did last year, outside the top 20 in completion rate from a clean pocket. That's really the issue here. And as you said, Sunday is definitely going to be a litmus test since the Titans are exactly what they were last year. You can't run on them at all, but have your way through the air. Even Justin Herbert over 300 yards, except that whenever they got the first possession of overtime, of course, because they're the Chargers, they went 3 and out and ended up losing the game. So, yeah, I'm excited to see if the passing game can move the ball, because without Nick Chubb, who was the heart and soul of that offense, chains with him on the ground, they just become a completely different attack, and everything now relies on Deshaun Watson, despite how good Jerome Ford is. And I'm sure y'all talked up Jerome Ford highly earlier on the show as well.
Yeah, but just watching Jerome Ford, he definitely passes the eye test. We know that Kareem Hunt is currently in Cleveland right now visiting with the team. Just like, can we find out by like the end of the night whether he signs with the Browns or not? So people like with making waiver claims on Jerome Ford have that information before we blow all our fob on Jerome Ford tonight. Like, I'm sure we're not going to find out if it's going to be
Don't do it.
Well, some of us might have already done it last week on Justice Hill and don't have the money now to spend on Jerome Ford. I might be one of those people in frustrating fashion. And watching Deshaun Watson for a couple games this season, and we'll move past Cleveland in a second, but obviously Cleveland was a really interesting team coming into the year. If Watson's going to be Houston-level Deshaun Watson, maybe the Browns could go like 15-2, maybe make a run at the Super Bowl. And if he's not, maybe it'll look like what it did last night when Deshaun Watson basically lost the game for the Cleveland Browns. Like, what have you seen from Watson in the first 2 weeks? You have optimism he can kind of turn it around with his level of play on field.
I don't have optimism that he could turn it around. I mean, you said it, the first 2 weeks, and it's the preseason, and it's the 6-game stretch last year. I mean, we're getting a big enough sample size. I kind of wrote off at the end of last season just because the lack of work with the team and the suspension, just everything that he had to go through, to get back on the field. Okay, you say, let's see what he does with a full off season of work, and he was throwing with his guys. And so, now it's definitely on him. As much as we could sit here and say fantasy-wise, Jerome Ford is the guy for the Browns. The guy for the Browns is Deshaun Watson. And so, they added pieces. Elijah Moore was, I think, a smart addition, trading for him from the Jets. Amari Cooper is still there, and David Njoku. It's a very sound receiving core. It's just a matter of right now he's just, very erratic. He'll make one good throw and then 5 bad ones, holding the ball too long. It looks as if he's a step slower. So, you kind of got rested a little bit last week with his rushing, and I think he still has that in his back. He can, rely on his legs, but, he's got to be a little bit more decisive. And I don't know if that's just him, that's the coaching staff, that's just a combination of everything, where he's at in his career. So I don't have a lot of faith in Deshaun Watson, and now he loses what has been his crutch, which is Nick Chubb. So Jerome Ford's going to have to do a lot to help out Deshaun Watson and sort of make things a little bit settled in that Browns offense.
But as we sit right now at BetMGM, Cleveland -3, -110. So the Browns a flat 3-point home favorite against Ryan Tannehill and the Titans. The total here 39.5. Obviously no Nick Chubb for the rest of the season for Cleveland. And Deshaun Watson, the early return's not great through 2 games for Watson this season. So again, Browns -3, 39.5. Ken, pen, pencil, blood, or blank on the Browns and the Titans in Cleveland?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have a really, maybe not a tough decision, but like a really interesting decision to make in this game. I think this point spread of Cleveland -3, I mean, there's just no way to argue it. It represents like an incredible downgrade of Cleveland after what we've seen in the first 2 weeks. I mean, you compare spreads to performances. There's just, I don't care how hurt Burrow was or how much they own the Cincinnati Bengals. You can't go from like pick against Cincinnati and then the spread that we saw last night, favored on the road in a division game against a pretty good team, to just 3 at home against this. I mean, you can't do that without having looked really bad, right? So this is a case where like the market had kind of viewed Cleveland a certain way, and they performed, I think, much worse. Especially Watson has performed much worse than we thought, and you also have the added kind of not bonus, but extra, potential angle in this game of like Cleveland played an absolute brawl on Monday Night Football, and now they play Sunday, and that's kind of tough. And so early in the season, our favorite word, spot, everything about this, how Cleveland has played recently, how Deshaun has played recently, that they played Monday night, everything kind of lines up to, I think, create a situation where at more than 3, people were really interested in taking Tennessee in the game. And, the look-ahead market, and I don't use this as a way to make a bet, but it's just like worth noting, like just how much Cleveland is being downgraded, and you have to figure out whether you agree with that. Like this was probably going to be like 4.5 if Cleveland gave you like a better performance on Monday night, and realistically, and they didn't, and that's why you get what you get. And Tennessee looked probably a little better than people thought, and that's why you get what you get. So with it now sitting on the key number of 3, I think your choice in this game is honestly just like, do you want to bet Cleveland, yes or no? I mean, I think that's like I don't know what the case is for Tennessee. If it's like, well, Watson stinks. Be like, yeah, and they just got downgraded like they're the Texans or something. Like, we all got it. He's bad. We all watched the game. That's why it's 3. Now what? Now what are you going to do? And it's like, I think it's bet Cleveland or nothing. So the sort of fun thing in this game, some of the 3s on the Tennessee side have gotten bet to the point that if let's say Cleveland gets an unexpectedly bad injury report beyond the things we already know, 2.5 ever in this game. That's now we're talking. Now that's a buy on Cleveland for me if we're going to get less than this number. I think this is like a sound adjustment to how bad Watson has been, and I don't disagree with it that much. 2.5 I think is like a big time love Cleveland bet. 3 I think is like, do you really want to bet Deshaun Watson -3 against anybody right now? Or is this season going to circle the drain and they're going to fire Stefanski and this whole thing's going to get off the rails? That's possible. And so I think it's Cleveland or nothing. For me, I'd be much more interested in Cleveland, obviously, at a worse number.
So what's your buy point on Cleveland?
2.5.
2.5 on the Cleveland Browns. Have I told the story behind 2.5 and why it's said in a high pitched voice? Have I told that on the air?
If you did, it was a long time ago. We've talked about it a lot off the air. If you're not comfortable telling it, it's fine. It can just be a high pitched voice. It's fine.
I don't mind. I don't mind telling the story because it's not insulting to anyone.
Right.
So I'll quickly tell the story. So why are we saying 2.5 like that? The reason is when I used to work at Sirius XM NFL Radio. The late, great Dan Reeves, legendary NFL head coach, legendary NFL tight end before he was a head coach with the Dallas Cowboys, I used to produce shows that Dan Reeves hosted, and Dan Reeves would be on ISDN, and Coach unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. Super nice guy, great to work with, coached the Giants when I was a kid, and the breaks at Sirius are 2.5 minutes long. So, or most of the breaks, except for the bottom of the hour and the top of the hour, are 4.5 minute breaks. So, the end of the first segment of the hour, first segment of the show, we'd get to the break and we would turn him on in what's called Q, right? Meaning that we talk to him and it doesn't go over the air. And he's not in studio, so we hit Q on the ISDN line. And we would say, all right, Coach, 2.5. Meaning you have 2.5 minutes until we're back from break. And Coach would always repeat back to us in a high pitched voice. He'd go, 2.5. And it became we all of us, we were all kids at the time. We're all 40 now, all of us. But we all thought it was great. And it wasn't even making fun of Dan Reeves. Dan Reeves was the man. He was the best.
Yeah.
He was really
he
cool
chose
to work
to do
with.
That
just
too. Yeah,
it was just really funny that he did that. It was great.
Yeah. 2.5.
Yeah, so that's where 2.5 comes from, because Dan Reeves, the late great Dan Reeves, used to do that off air when I produced for him at Sirius XM NFL Radio.